Sahil, how are you today?
Good. Kevin, are we presenting on the bottom left?
We're not yet.
It says live, 1 minute.
Oh,
Yeah, it goes
okay,
away.
we are live now.
We're live now. Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are very excited to bring you the buy or build conversation today. We have some exciting stuff to go through with you. We hope you're settled in comfortably at home or at your home office or on the road or wherever you may be. And we hope you're safe out there as well. Today, we're going to be going over buy versus build. We have Tango Code here. We have TapClicks here. We're going to be walking through kind of some strategies, tactical as well as strategic, on kind of the new normal and how to prepare, how to look at our current situations and the future situations. With us today, we have Veronica Buitron, or if you're actually proper, Witron. You know her as the CEO and co-founder of Tango Code and an ardent supporter of women in technology. Born and raised in Uruguay, she's built a successful software development firm out of Chicago that specializes in automation of technology for digital marketers, and she is going to be representing the build side of the conversations today. On the other side of the coin, we have Sahil here, who joins us as a recent addition through acquisition to TapClicks. As a rising star in the ad tech space, his knowledge of the buy side, kind of creating those structures that are in place that allow connectors to come in and people to kind of get going from day one, is really going to be on display for today. If you have questions, there is the question field in the upper right-hand corner there. Please feel free to use that. We will be addressing the questions near the end if there's something that is relevant to the team. As we go along, I will definitely be introducing those questions along the way. Here's the team as you know them. I am Kevin. I am going to be your guide on this journey as we go through it today. So we're, again, very happy for everybody to be here today. Starting off the conversation, we have to start at the start, right? We have been shut down. Advertising has been shut down. People have been pulling back budgets and really trying to think of how to re-engage and restart the conversation with their target audience. And so the first part of today, the first question really to the team today is, how do we start after stopping? There's so much that goes into that question and it's so broad, but we're going to try to address that a little bit with the team here. There's strategy, there's personnel, there's reaching out to clients, and there's targets that we're going after. The cost of reopening, what are the mandates for reopening? So maybe Sahil, you can start us off. What are some of the key things that you have experienced in talking to customers and looking at platforms that people are going to want to start thinking about when they're restarting their campaigns and restarting advertising?
Sure. So just to give the audience a little bit of background too. So I just recently, as Kevin mentioned, joined the TapClicks team. I ran a company, a previous venture-backed company called AdStage for 8 years, and we built advertising technology for mid-market brands and agencies. So we had hundreds of brands and agencies using our platform to analyze their digital advertising across channels, to put it simply. And so it gave us a pretty unique perspective. Our products are still running under the TapClicks brand. And so we're able to actually look across all of our customers to see the fluctuations in things like spend, for example. So we produced this 70-page report called our benchmark report. And we actually saw, surprise, surprise, a number of businesses that had retracted their spend a little bit or contracted on this ad spend side over the last 2 months. A couple of things that are interesting. One is that we're starting to see in a variety of different trends that start to come back. I think, a lot of businesses out of, reasonable fear, right, kind of pulled things back. They had to make structural changes to their business. We're starting to adapt to the topic of this presentation, which is to the new normal. And you're starting to see marketing campaigns come back online, but albeit in different approaches. They may have a narrative that actually ties into the world pandemic and COVID, and they're able to actually use that narrative to push certain product or to provide a valuable service. A lot of businesses are also, they've made structural changes to their businesses to offer free months, right? So at AdStage, when people wanted to cancel, we actually gave them a number of months for free to bridge the gap until we get out of this as a group. And so all of those different examples are groundwork being placed so that when we emerge from this, when our customers emerge from this, they're set up successfully from a financial standpoint, and they're not overburdened with a bunch of existing processes they've had in place that ultimately now need to change. And so I think the reason we picked this question specifically as a topic is that there's a lot of conversation around how to mitigate what we're going through now, right? And all the loss that businesses are incurring now as we're in COVID. But there have not been as many conversations about how expensive is it, what is the cost incurred to start back up.
Right.
Think about like a restaurant, it's buying inventory again, but they're going to have minimum capacity. So if they have 25% capacity, their business model fundamentally changes. They have to rethink a whole business model and relaunch that. Similarly to marketers, when we come out of this, there are going to be tons of lagged effects over time. So all of those need to be pulled into the calculus of starting our marketing programs back up. So the one example I'll give, and then I'll pass it over to Veronica, is sales pipeline. So a lot of us have lost pipeline, a tremendous amount of pipeline that marketing is responsible for driving. So when we come out of this, we're not going to just recoup 3 months of pipeline necessarily, just like having to pay 3 months of rent that maybe you've pushed off. It's going to be a challenge. And so I think in our case, we're going to see a lot of marketers be key in unsustainable actions. So things like paid advertising. You might see a spike when we come back out, and that's going to be a predicted cost that we need to factor into our business because it's not sustainable for normal growth, right? But you might see 3x the budgets just to refill that pipeline. So I'll stop at that one example. There's a number of them, but I'll pass it over to my fellow presenter, Veronica.
Hi, thank you. And first of all, thank you for having me here. I think this topic is, top of mind of all of us. And I think it is important to have these conversations. Hopefully there would be some participation from the audience, because I think one of the things that we have learned through this is an uncertainty is what we have to learn how to live with, day by day. Every day have been very different. So we don't know exactly how we're going to be reopening. What we do know is that it's going to be a process, and we're going to be with this new normal for a while, as Sahil was saying, and as we're standing right now, right? So we have like 40% of the population is in some sort of lockdown, the US, right? We're talking about, we have 30 states that started to reopen. We have 18 states that are still having some lockdown. We have businesses looking at reopening. We have been talking to some businesses and agencies about how they are helping their customers in the reopening process, right? And it's important to see. I totally agree with Sahil with the things that you were saying. It is important to take into account that cost, right? And that is spread across many industries, and in every industry it's a little bit different. One of the things that we have learned through this pandemic is there's not such a thing about one size fits all, right? We all have very different experiences, and it's very different how dentistry office is going to open versus how home services, and versus how real estate of dealerships, right? Mm-hmm. And as we looked at the different strategies, as Sahil was mentioning, right? You have in the strategies you have to be considering the PPE, the personal protection. You will have to be considering the gear that you will have to provide to your employees, right? If you have to provide services, what's the cost of turning around? So I was talking in the dentistry office, they have to add 30 minutes. They starting back yesterday, and they have to add 30 minutes to every hour of the processes in order to be able to turn around their rooms. And they are hoping to bring that 30 minutes back to 20 minutes, right? But as they become more efficient, but as you started something new, you're not efficient right away, and you will have to learn, right? So at the scheduling now, dentistry used to be able to stag patients. They cannot stag them anymore. They have to schedule them less patients. They have to be able to have the protective a plexiglass on the checkout stations. The employee training, they're rehiring, right? It's some employees that basically might not be able to come back because of health concerns, or they basically are choosing not to come back. So then there's the cost of rehiring. All in all, we're looking at an impact of the first month of opening that it may be something between, depending on the industries, like 20 to 30% revenue loss. And we need to consider that in marketing. One of the key parts that in marketing agencies and companies can help the clients is help understand how they're going to be safe. Right, so you want your customers back, but you want to be sure that you can tell them, okay, this is how I'm going to keep you safe. The same thing with your employees. This is how I'm going to keep you safe. So communication, it's key. One of the things that we have seen is content, right? Content becoming like a big thing through this process because of education and research being, so important through these times.
Yeah, and we're seeing CEOs now becoming the voice and face of companies instead of high-paid actors that were doing it before. So not only just in that, but we're seeing those people become more involved in it. You bring up an interesting point about efficiency, and that really leads us into our next question, or next discussion topic, really, is automation and streamlining the repetition. The brute force formula of the past is definitely not going to work moving forward. We've all seen Greatest Showman, and we saw Hugh Jackman in the big room with all the accountants, doing their little work. That's just not going to work anymore. There's not enough people on the floors anymore to do that. To go through the spreadsheets, to compile the data. We have more work with fewer people as we look to come out of this. That looks like it's going to continue to be the case. Veronica, maybe you can lead off this part of it and talk about automation in Marcom and ad tech, and what you guys are doing to address kind of the redundancy and taking, alleviating that redundancy and bringing efficiencies back.
Yeah, absolutely. So through this process, one of the things that I think we can all agree that businesses had to do, it had been to be more like cash flow oriented, and be a little bit less about long-term ROI, but more about what we have in hand. So we all had been looking at how we can be more efficient. And even if with this cost of reopening, we are adding inefficiencies in our process, right? We'll have to, in order to keep us safe, we are adding inefficiencies. And therefore, it's not only that it is important to be more efficient because of, trying to recoup some of the lost revenue, but because we are having to add inefficiencies to our process. So I think we're going to see a deeper focus in automation. And a deeper focus in automation also, I believe, is going to change. So in digital marketing, that's basically our business is help automation in the digital marketing companies, agencies, provide them a way that they can actually automate more of the practices. But something that we have seen before as a tendency, I think is going to become a lot more of a specific route, which it is seeing automation not only as a way of solving repetitive tasks. So, we were in the path of if you want to release the creativity of the human being and allow us to use our brain to come up with more unique type of ideas, we needed to do less of the repetitive work, right? So that's where automation, it's perfect and it's great. But we're seeing other ways, we have clients before that they have looked at automation as a way of saying, how can I build end-to-end services, end-to-end products, end-to-end offerings, where I can actually provide value to my clients, but with end-to-end solutions where the cost for me to maintain it from a human being perspective is really low. Now we have businesses that they had to be forced to lower headcount. And I think it is an opportunity to look at your services, right? And seeing about, okay, how are you providing those services, right? How is there is an opportunity to do maybe some consolidation of your services? We have been talking to clients that really they have used to offer services in a silo, like you do search or you do, social media, or you do this, other channel. And now they have to look at the client as a whole, right? How can they be able to communicate that they are open, communicate that they're safe, at the same time as being sure that they come up in the search terms, or looking at the search terms as an opportunity of how to develop content to be on top of mind of the customers. And I think like this is going to give us opportunity to see automation in a way, not just from automate repetitive, but really as a reinventing the way that we provide services.
So it sounds like your idea behind this is really about leveraging automation to allow companies to be more strategic about how they're thinking, giving them more time to explore other opportunities within their own company and then within their own clients and expand that base.
Absolutely. And especially tying in to ROI, right? We basically have to be a lot more ROI driven, understanding like our services, the services of, digital marketing companies, right? How do they tie to ROI? Which are the ones that gives you the most? How consolidating them might become a good opportunity, to provide more end-to-end automation products, and and use the more white glove approach, whatever is truly needed.
Sahil, what's your take on automation, and how have you leveraged it in the past with AdStage, and how are you looking forward as we come out of this to use automation as a key cornerstone, for selling, for strategy, for tactical? How are you viewing it?
Yeah. So for us, when I think about automation, my head immediately goes to tooling. And so I think when, just kind of bringing it to the COVID story in general, right? Many of us had I think on average, there's like 30 something number of SaaS tools that an organization already uses. Most SaaS tools are a form of automation or workflow improvements or efficiency gains. And so a number of us had to cut a lot of those tools initially, along with, unfortunately, a number of people. So then you get into this predicament of how can we do more with less, right? And it's intuitively, everyone worries about doing more with less. But the great news is, as a human species, we find ways to do more with less all the time. In fact, a lot of businesses, and I know this is going to sound callous, I don't mean for it to, but for businesses who have been hit with layoffs, which is incredibly unfortunate, especially given the circumstances. That said, these businesses are going to be pushed into a corner, and that's when creativity comes out on how they can truly do more with less. It may also make some businesses that may have been bloated by size, which there are a number of large Silicon Valley companies that grew to be so large that you wonder how they're even running efficiently, to become more efficient, right? So I think that just on the first, in the first glance, when you talk about personnel, there will be efficiencies that will glean from these changes. The other thing about automation I think is interesting is one thing that I think will be a great byproduct of the situation that we're in currently is a number of businesses are being forced into digital transformation far faster than they have been doing so. I mean, if you just look at all the big retailers, they've been dragging their feet for 15 years when it comes to digital transformation.
Oh, forever, yeah.
Right? But now they're forced to do that or go bankrupt. And so there's a number of businesses, when you just look at restaurants, like how they're having to change their business model. And with any big change, right, you go through the stages of grief. You also have to kind of adapt. And you're going to go through a change, right? You get a limb cut off. You figure out how to reorient yourself. And so I think that automation will start to fill gaps in areas where we can truly do more with less. So whether that's tooling for the marketer and being able to, whether it's tools like TapClicks or whether it's using services like Tango Code or tools like AdStage, where we built tools that truly automate the day-to-day tasks when it comes to campaign optimization or what have you. Or you'll also see variants of automation being implemented with regards to how we build out our teams again, right? So like in a very different look, a lot of us have scaled down in terms of number of people, a lot of businesses. But at the same time, you're hearing there's a lot of literature that's going out there about how contracting services and work, hiring people that are not full-time employees, but starting to leverage these contractor forces will be really critical in the new way of doing work as we come out of this. And being able to build the systems internally to automate the ability to spin up work and spin down work will be very important as well. So I think you're going to see a lot of these businesses start to figure out how they can systemize the process of getting, for hire work for certain projects, and then being able to shed those costs in a bit more of like a organic way, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And one of the things, and totally agree with you, because one of the interesting things, like everything, like I think there's always a good thing, and there's a lot of opportunities out there. One of the interesting things that we're going to see is change of behavior. Online is here. It's here to stay, and it's going to be even more and more. So there were this pandemic showed us the presence that we're taking for granted, right? So although we did a lot of things online, we took present for granted. So when you look at real estate, right, and you look at how virtual tours now and the way that you communicate with your agent online and how that actually was successful through this process, that means that it's changing, really. It's not going to go back. It's changing the way that you're offering your services. Even the way that we buy cars. We serve a lot on the real estate and on the automotive industry, and there you've seen obviously a big impact, but also you're seeing how the virtual tours in the cars, and how you are able to use more of the online, and that is going to continue to be more deep. And one of the things that marketing companies can do, companies that actually build products, is looking at how can we support even more and more of that online process, how we can truly help these companies digitalize. Because we're going to be seeing a lot more of the digitalization of the services, and how can we support them in an efficient way? And that's automation, right? You can, when you think about online, you need a level of automation.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I saw a recent article that said consumer buying behavior, because of this, has jumped 5 years ahead of where all the forecasts had consumer buying behavior. So all of a sudden you have, like you said, Sahil, retailers who've been doing the same thing all along, now forced to make a change because the entire marketplace has jumped 5 years ahead of where all the forecasts were. So that automation, that level of ingenuity needs to come in quickly, and automation may be a key way to get that done. I think that really leads us nicely into kind of our next point here, which is, Sahil, you spoke that there's 30 plus SaaS tools in the market. We know that there's so much out there, and they're built and designed to create more efficiencies in our life. You referenced one of the big Silicon Valley companies, right? Salesforce has created an entire job vertical of Salesforce engineers, right? People who all they do is work on Salesforce. That's their entire lot in life. And this is a tool that's intended to make our lives easier, but we have entire careers based on streamlining and simplifying that main tool for us. You have, Google Analytics continues to drive more of what they have and what they're offering. And we may see Google Analytics engineers in the near future, career paths, helping people to streamline Google Analytics, which was built and intended to help us become more efficient about what we're doing. You have your ads, Google Ads, right? You have Facebook, you have Google Analytics, and then you layer on top of it your display ads that you're doing, or your video ads that you're doing, the exchanges that you're working with, and then we even get to radio and broadcast and other things. There's so many tools that are meant to simplify our lives but it creates confusion in a system that's already overwhelmed with the data that they're processing on a daily basis. Now we're piling on more data through streamlining tools. So how do we really kind of move forward with this? I think this is kind of the crux of our conversation, right? The buy versus build, or a hybrid of the two. How do we do more with fewer tools, right? How do we streamline the tool set that we have? And how do people who are watching this now make better decisions about that tool set, knowing that we're going to be moving forward in this kind of arena? Sahil, maybe you can kind of lead off the discussion there on how do we become more efficient with tools that are built for efficiency, but are overwhelming us?
Yeah, so it's a great question. There's a number of different areas that I think a business has to look at, right? So first of all, it's cutting redundant tools, right? And I think that's something that we're all doing. But within those tools, most of the time when we buy a tool, right, how many of us have authorized buying a certain tool, for example? And I mean, how many times would you say that your team has used the tool to the 100% capacity or availability that it has? Probably very few, right? Most of the time, a tool is being underutilized because of implementation time, or we have 5 other competing priorities, not for bad reasons necessarily, but certainly when we pay $100K a year for a certain tool, we're not probably getting that value in exchange, certainly in year 1, right? Hopefully you are. Hopefully you're getting, there's certain great tools out there like intercom.io or a variety of tools that we use at AdStage that we get 10x the value from, right? Even with not using it and utilizing it fully. So I think the very first thing that businesses are going to have to do, which is, shrewd business, but I think very important, is looking across the actual utilization percentage of the various tools that are being used. So for example, if you're buying a platform like Salesforce, and if you're just using it to log calls or just to open up opportunities, you're underutilizing Salesforce. If you're not using the workflow that you paid, yeah, right. And if you're not using the workflows engine that you can build out workflows to, round robin leads, to open opportunities or put a score on opportunities, all sorts of cool things you can build out, I would say that's underutilizing the tool. So I think with fewer tools, it's going to be our prerogative and our job to make sure that we're fully utilizing the tools we do have budget for. And I do think that's going to be a collective effort from, let's say you're a marketing team and you have a director of marketing and the rest of the folks on the team. I think everyone's going to have to come together and be really honest about the actual utilization today. Even at TapClicks, we've been doing a number of things on consolidation around platforms for, let's say, email marketing, right? Are we going to, we have some brands that are using things like HubSpot or some brands that are using Pardot. Are we going to consolidate into a single tool so we can be more efficient across those initiatives, right? If we had all brands in a single one, maybe we could. So I think that sort of consolidation of effort, not just consolidation of tools, will also be very important as we look to leverage the fewer tools we now have budget for.
So talk to me also about, and the audience in general, about integrations, right? Because you have these tools, some of them are siloed and some of them are moving towards deeper integration so that they can provide you greater service across whatever you may happen to be interested in, right? Speak to that a little bit on the integrations that you see and how that's going to be playing out as we kind of escape from this quarantine we're under.
Yeah. So the good news is so many products claim that they're platforms, and you're not truly a platform if you don't have integrations or connectors or those types of systems, right? So I think by virtue of having platforms in place, they're going to have more and more integrations. Some companies execute well on that, some don't. There are also a lot of middleware companies. I call them middleware, but you can look at companies like a segment.com, right? Which is a great example of middleware that enables integrations into all the different systems that you're using today. So I think, like anything, my recommendation to organizations is to build out their stack for the respective functions. So whether it's your marketing stack, whether it's your sales stack, and ensure that you don't just have 10 platforms, but maybe you have 2, but you have interoperability between those platforms. And you do that by leveraging tools that are like maybe middleware, like Segment, and making sure that your event data is being passed from HubSpot over to Salesforce, for example, right? And the efficacy of those tools will then rise as you're able to leverage them more appropriately and more holistically. So I think it's important to balance. I guess my takeaway is it's important to balance your stack, whatever your technology stack is, with not just end solutions, but with middleware that improves the efficiency of those end platforms that you may be using. And middleware usually is a form of integration, right? So I think that would be my approach to designing around fewer tools.
Yeah. Veronica, you guys have built your business around, creating customized tech stacks, right? And it sounds like an awesome term. Like I want a customized tech stack, right? That sounds like a super cool thing. It's like for car guys, right? A 454 with a 4-barrel carb. Yeah, give me that. That's what I want. Customized tech stack. How are you weaving in that integration conversation with your customers as well? Sahil talked about integration in for the buy side. You're working on the build side. How do you weave in integrations to simplify on your side?
So as you're saying, we are basically on the build, but in every approach, we strongly believe that any decision in technology, buy, rent, build, any decision in technology needs to support in and business objective and an ROI. So we start there. Actually, we always start there. And we start there. We provide strategy workshops. Actually, there used to be like, even us as a technology company, we had like these on-site workshops that now we obviously needed to convert online. But the strategy workshops is to actually build the plan, right? Because there's not a perfect solution, right? There's not, when you look at tools, you can get 100-point solutions. You can get, fewer tools that don't do maybe exactly what you want, and you really all what you want is you want to be effective, right? But we can't really have it at all. There's never enough time or money to have all the features and everything that I want for everything that I do, right? And as Sahil was saying, even if you had it, you will not going to use it. You're not even going to have time to use it. So one of the things that we always talked about is prioritization, starting with like the minimum viable products, starting with a small approach that you can build upon. And so we looked at what are the business objectives? What's your core competency? What is your differentiation and how you're going to support that? And we basically, from there, we start going down and said, okay, so if that's your core competency, we need to protect that. Normally, we protect core competencies by building something customized. But in all the other parts that support that core competency, but they're not directly related with an ROI, then we start to say, okay, what can you buy, or rent to support that? And you defined what we call operational guidelines, key guidelines. What are the things that had to be true, and what are the things that are not that important? And those becomes your guidelines on to make prioritizations, because the devil is in the details. Yeah, we have this great experience with a client that actually had two areas, right? They had the part of the more of the agency services, and then the part more of like it for customers that have lower budgets, fully automatable product. And it was very easy to get the alignment at the top and said, okay, we want what are the three things that need to be true? And it was like it needed to be turn on the fully automated product, turn on within 24 hours. It needed to be easy to sell, right? And easy to set up. Great. So with those, primary guidelines. The problem if afterwards was we started talking with the salespeople, and it was like, okay, so what can I offer if the customer wants to spend more budget? Well, no. It's going to have only one price to start with, because if we start adding different levels, we're going to add a complexity that, it will actually not support those three guidelines that we spent all the time agreeing on. So the devil is in the details. So when you're trying to look at what each of the, the tools or the things that you build, what do they support, and what do you really need them? There's so many sometimes, opportunities where people will say, okay, we want to build this, right? Because we're spending too much money on this tool. And I think if we build it, it will be less, but it needs to have all these features. And they compare the features with, tools that spend, millions of dollars building features. And we're like, no. Number one is when you build the things that will make a huge difference. Like in this fully automatable, we have to say no to too many things. But you know what's the difference? In 1 year, they were able to convert basically 4,000 clients. They have 4,000 people in the fully automated product, supporting it with a handful team. On the service side, which we also did some automation for them on the services side, they have up to 3 years, 400 customers, which is good, but they had the double of people. And what had happened, it was a very strict line, right? If you wanted multiple budgets, you will go to this side. So if you wanted more of the services, you go to this side. The funny thing is, like, if we didn't have those guidelines, we would have built for that. We would have built for when the salesperson wanted these different services or what is different budgets. By putting those lines and saying, okay, if this doesn't happen, this is not true, then you go to that other side. We were able to test and see. And after a year, what we were thinking upselling was one of the opportunities. It really didn't happen. It was very few people went to the other side, but we would have built those features, if we didn't have those guidelines, those key guidelines. So I think for any type of decision, build, buy, hybrid approach, which is basically what we support. We don't think the idea of a marketing stack being built totally from scratch, absolutely from scratch. Normally, it's like, if that's what you do, if that's your core competency, right?
Yeah.
TapClicks, and even I'm sure even you guys are using, different things. We always are in a hybrid type of solution, but it's all about what is the objective that you're trying to get to. Is it to lower your turnaround? Then fewer tools, integration between them would be the interoperability. That would be very important. So it really, there's not that one size fit all, and that's why basically for us we started with a strategy workshop, because it is really about seeing what a mix of tools and buy and integration between them is what it will be better support your key guidelines.
Yeah. It again takes us nicely into our final topic here, but it's really about agility and positioning for the future. You guys have both spoken about today and how to do things today, how to bring more efficiencies into companies today, streamlining, fewer tools, more integrated tools. How do we restart? But as we are doing this, self-inspection, how do we position for the future and making sure that what we're building today, the efforts that we're putting in today, are going to have results for us in the long term? Just looking back a few years, and this definitely dates me, but there was a platform, many of you may not remember it, called MySpace. MySpace was the end-all be-all at the time, right? Everybody had to be on MySpace. And people started building integrations in with MySpace, and they had their whole thing going. And then all of a sudden, the four walls came down on MySpace after Rupert Murdoch bought them. And then it shifted, right? Then it was Facebook. And then it was all these other platforms that came online. The next great platform is out there. Somebody's developing it in their garage right now. So how, as agencies, as marketers, as strategists, how do we look at the agility of not only the economy and the world situation, but also the evolving nature of media, right? To make sure that what we're building today allows us to plug into the future and be available for the next great thing. A quick story. back a few years ago, I was working at a big ad agency, and they were digital, and they did pop-up ads and those kind of things. And we were just getting into omnichannel. I was launching the omnichannel platform for them, talking about how to pull in analytics. So we get in this big meeting, and somebody pulls me aside, one of the executives, and says, so you're talking about omni-channel. Is this like a religious thing? Is this like a new religious distribution network? I'm like, no, that's the alpha and omega channel. This is entirely different. This is omni-channel. This is bringing all of your advertising together and giving you visibility. So under that auspice of omni-channel that everybody wants to be talking about, that's kind of the holy grail. How do we leverage all the conversation we've talked about today to prepare ourselves for the eventual change from, the eventual new Facebook that's out there, the new Instagram or the new TikTok or whatever it may happen to be?
Sure, I can start. I think, so hopefully, my opinion is that the smart businesses today are not making the changes for today. I think some of them, like cost cutting, obviously like OpEx and those types of changes need to be made immediately. But I think even those changes are being made with the future in mind, if you're a good company, right? I think intelligent companies, even the way that they're cutting their staff today, right? They're thinking about how do they come out of this? What does it look like? That would be at least that's my hope. When it comes to operational efficiency, you shouldn't be making the cuts just for the current need. I think there's a really great quote, and I don't know who said this. I'm sure many people have said it, but fortunes are made in a downturn and cashed out when things are great. And I think really intelligent companies right now are making the appropriate moves to set themselves up for the future. So for example, I think it's a forcing function to cut a number of SaaS tools on your bills, right? For example, and a lot of businesses usually just have 20 or 30 extra tools they're not really using or fully utilizing, and they should cut them anyway. But COVID is now forcing us to take these actions. So, and similarly with staff, I think, again, I don't want to be the callous guy on the call, but I think that there are some changes that do need to be made in organizations where you do need to get rid of some of the potential bloat in the organization. I think, granted, a lot of businesses have had to cut very, very deep and cut very, very amazing folks. And that I think is different. But a lot of the changes that we're making now from a unit economic standpoint. So I think certain businesses in the technology sector are going to have to improve their unit economics now, so that when they come out of this and need funding, they're going to have the right type of not only balance sheet, but the appropriate unit economics to raise capital, right? That they'll be spending efficiently. I think cash will always be scrutinized as we go forward. So making sure that your business knows how to manage cash, whether that's a department like a marketing team, or that's an overall business and you're managing an entire P&L. I think being able as an investor to see how you manage cash during these downturns is going to be a prerequisite for additional funding, right? So I think the style upon which people are acting now is going to affect their future outcomes. And I think that's really important. So while we're making these changes today, they certainly should be made with the future in mind. I think the couple of things I would probably say we need to focus on is, one, becoming more profitable. Businesses need to be more profitable. I've run 2 Silicon Valley companies, and profitability was like totally down the list. And that was bad, but it's true. Like, we raised a bunch of VC money, and it was like, we'll get profit. Maybe we'll be profitable one day. There's a ton of businesses that go public and they're not profitable, right? So I think that will change. I think the barometer for what's a successful organization will also change as we move into it. And so that's one. I think we harped on it enough, but I think the efficiencies around tooling and systems that you have internally will need to be fully utilized. And so understanding how to measure that will be important for the future. And then adaptability. So what you brought up about omnichannel, that example, right? The idea is organizations need to always make a bet on what the future 10 years are going to look like. And they need to make sure they're designing their organization to be adaptive, right? And so as we move into whatever the new normal is, the reality is we have no idea what it's going to look like. What we can bet on now is, can we make sure that our organization is staffed and designed that whatever the new normal is, we can adapt to it, right? Some businesses are built in such a rigid manner that it doesn't matter what the new normal is, but if it's anything just different, right, they won't be able to adapt. And so I think designing for adaptability, it's kind of without knowing what the future is going to hold, is really important. And different organizations will go about that differently. And if we look at an actual department level, like a marketing organization, an example of that is utilizing more contractors, right? So instead of having a full-time designer on staff or a full-time copywriter or those types of things, who knows? in the future will design matter? I'm using a bad example, but maybe not, in which case like having that role be as a contractor may be easier to spin up and spin down based on what the new normal will look like. That's an example of staffing in an adaptive manner, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my thought.
Veronica, what's your thought on agility for the future and how you guys are building things?
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree in adaptability. One of the things that, so the answer of businesses through this process had been kind of like, not uniform, right? So it had been very different. We have seen companies and businesses that had been able to adapt, and they had been able to then come out of this stronger and better, because they were able to change quickly and adapt their processes. You have like event caterers that once event totally go down, they're able to reposition us with family packs, and they actually saw a whole new revenue that they didn't even considered before. You have, on the other hand, some restaurants that were not able really to turn on online, and they were not able to. They were not managing correctly their online presence, and they were not able to turn that online distribution with a good experience. The food ended up being cold or not good, and but reviews were not good. Actually, that's one of the reasons even that the reviews were able to they had to be stopped, and they were basically not able to adapt. So I think that the one very, very important lesson we all learn is like, in moments of uncertainty, the ones that are able to change and adapt are the ones that are going to come out stronger.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's not about, it's not about size. It's not about, how big you were or how small you were. It's really about how you were able to adapt. And that goes in different levels, right? So when you said how you're able to adapt, you need to look in all levels. You need to look at your services, right? You need to look at your processes. How do you perform your processes? How if you have to change, can you do it? How do you communicate with, throughout your chain of operations? Do you have a streamline communication? Because then you are able to adapt quickly, right? But if you don't, then if you work like in sales, it's going to be much, much harder. So it's about your operations. It is about employee training. You need to basically train your employees with a certain level of certainty. And it's about your tech, how your tech is built. Can you connect it? How many of the tools that you have don't have integrations? API integrations, external integrations. How easy it is for them to talk to, to put, because most of the times also you see at integration stuff that, oh yeah, I do have integrations. I can send something out. Nothing come in, but something out. I was like, well, that's not a true, integration, right? Are you adaptable? And are your tech stack adaptable? How easy it would be if I'm using a tool and now there's a new channel, and maybe the tool right away might not have that channel, but maybe not matter. Maybe if I can integrate it, with another small solution that has a new channel, then I can adapt quickly. I can take advantage. I can start offering that service. So that adaptability lens is something that it's a great learning. For the ones that didn't have it, it's like, how can I get it? For the ones that they were forced, think about it, that was a great gift that you were forced to do and you were able to do that. You cannot lose it.
Right.
Because that's the way that we will be able to come out stronger out of this.
Sounds good. Guys, thank you so much for your time today. We've covered so many topics here. They have all kind of blended together a little bit, but it's been a very fun conversation. We have a couple questions before we wrap up here, if you will bear with us. If you're watching online and you have questions, you can put it into the question thing. We're going to go through a couple of them right now. If you have questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to these guys. You'll have their Twitter information. You can contact us here as well, and we'd be happy to answer those questions for you. One of the questions says, can you elaborate further on the idea of automation and tying it into an agency's activities and bringing that forward and showing client ROI from that automation? Which I think is really a smart question, because we talked about how that automation affects you as a company internally, but then bringing that externally and showing clients ROI from your automation really kind of brings it full circle for people. Veronica, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and then Sahil, you can add some thoughts on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to be seeing, this is a great question, actually, whoever asked it, it's a great question, because I think as agencies, that question from clients are going to come more and more often, because there was such a focus on, especially if you were serving the in-store type of, there was such a focus on showing kind of like the in-store conversions, right? So the online activity all the way to show the, in-store conversions. And now this, change that. So how can we focus on showing ROI? That actually it should be added to any one of, as you're going through your marketing stack, as you're going through the tools, as you're going through your services, you basically we need to ask not only your objective internally. I want to be sure that I can get something up and running within 24 hours. That would be something really internal. But then it's like, how can I show the ROI to my client? So how well connected it is, for example, to the website, right, of the client. And then that needs to be part of that evaluation, and that how I'm connected with the online presence, right? How I'm able to bring it full circle. Right? How could I need to adapt to my services to be able to bring full circle to show that ROI? Because you're going to be asked that people, we're more cash flow oriented. We have to, do more with less. We need to, use less tools, bring some subscriptions down. We need to we are more conscious about what we're spending. So therefore, we also need to be showing, okay, if I can't show in-store visits, how can I show you ROI? How can I tell you, hey, it's safe to continue? It's a good practice to continue to be spending online, because now basically I'm going to be able to see, for example, the different types of behavior in your website to the different search queries to understand what type of conversations you should be having in your content with your clients. So things needs to be looked more integrated, and the ROI question, it needs to be applied to the lens of looking at your marketing stack.
Sahil, we have a couple more minutes left. Do you want to address the client ROI question?
Yeah, I think the question is interesting because it's tying an agency's activities to client ROI. So an agency in general is, supposed to show, is supposed to get a client ROI just on whatever activity it is, whether it's ad spend or, return on ad spend, for example. But what's interesting with this question is it's asking about, as agencies need to be pushed to become more efficient, how will that be reflected in the end client's ROI? I think is how I'm interpreting it. So. Yeah. One way of what could be interesting about that is maybe the agency's cost structure will decrease, right? So agencies are margin run businesses. And if it's the case in which an agency can become more efficient, then they don't necessarily need to charge as much. So, and which would in turn improve the client's ROI, right? So a lot of agencies today take their cut out of, the CPC, for example, they'll add in their margin. Right. And so effectively, if the agency is becoming more efficient, that will be a smaller cut. So I actually think the onus is on the client to really push, for example, all agencies right now, they as a service provider are being scrutinized, right? I think any client is saying, hey, we can't pay for this anymore. We're going to decrease our spend or decrease the activities we have with you. So I think in an agency's case, what they can do is by an agency becoming more efficient, they can probably offer more attractive pricing to the client, in turn improving the client's ROI. And I do think this is going to be important as we move into the next phase. Agencies will have to continue to iterate on their pricing model, just as any other service provider, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a delivery mechanism or something else. And I think that it'll be important for an agency to somewhat be reflective and say, in their pitch, maybe they say, hey, in the last 3 months as an agency, we've done X, Y, and Z things to make ourselves more efficient as an agency. And because of that, because of buying this tool, which has made our reporting faster or whatever, because of that, our price went from $3,000 to $2,000 a month or something. I'm just giving an example. So the overall efficacy of the campaign that the client is running with them will be that much better. And it'll help the agency keep business and sign new business with more attractive pricing. So I think maybe I just made the question more complicated, but I thought that was kind of, it was very interestingly asked. And so
it's great. It could be. I think there's also like a lot of times from from becoming more efficient, it's really you're forced just by the race of to the bottom of the margins in general. I like to look at the idea of the ROI and automation as also opportunities to additional different type of services, because I think there is an opportunity from an ROI perspective, from a different services for your clients. We all have to change. We all have to be forced to be more digitalized and more online. So looking at your client and from that perspective to protect even kind of like the ROI, how can you help them be more online, more digitalized, and less in store or with a better picture? So
yeah,
thinking like there are two sides, I think, in the question. Which
yeah. And it may be that the automation, because of the streamlining of it, allows the agencies to try different channels and to test different things at scale versus only having 1 or 2 channels that they can test at a time. Automation allows them to test 10 different channels, and that has a direct impact on ROI, because you may find those hidden gems where you can get better returns on the advertising they're doing.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic, guys. Well, thank you so much. One of the key takeaways here, it seems, is that real open and honest communication is what's coming out of this, internally and externally within the agencies and the brands, right? What do we need? What do we have? How can we make it better? I think you guys really put a point on all of that and helped people kind of get good ideas and conversation points to be having within their 4 walls on how do we affect today and how do we affect tomorrow for our businesses and for our clients. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you, everybody out there, for joining. We really appreciate you being here and your questions. Please stay safe out there and have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.